ready for a deep dive. Today we're exploring the world of wildlife scientific illustration, and we've got some fascinating excerpts from the Scientific Illustrator to guide us.
It's a fascinating blend of art and science. People often think it's all about meticulous detail, and while that's definitely important, there's also this incredible connection to aesthetics. It's like this inherent desire to capture the beauty of nature is woven into the very fabric of these illustrations.
Right, it's definitely not just about making something look pretty on a page. The article talks about how for centuries, these illustrations were vital scientific tools, especially in those days before we had cameras. Imagine trying to explain a brand new species to someone using only words.
It's almost impossible. And that's where the power of illustration comes in. The article mentions the Bauer brothers, Franz and Ferdinand.
Oh yeah, they were giants in the field, right?
Absolutely. During the late 18th and early 19th centuries, they were producing these incredibly detailed botanical and zoological illustrations. Imagine, you're sailing around the world, discovering new species left and right. How do you share those discoveries? Illustrations were pretty much the only way.
It's like they were sending back postcards from their expeditions, except instead of wish you were here, it's more like, look what we found.
Exactly. Every tiny detail, every whisker, every feather had this immense scientific value because, for all they knew, it might be the only record of that species for decades to come.
It's like the original Instagram for scientific discovery, but with way higher stakes than getting likes, right?
Absolutely. Those illustrations were critical for advancing our understanding of the natural world. And it's a legacy that continues today, even in our world of high-resolution photographs and 4K video. You can't exactly pose a wild animal for a perfect snapshot or capture the subtle differences between two very similar species in a single frame.
That's where the artists step in, right? They can highlight those tiny details, the anatomy, the behaviors, the things a photo just can't fully capture.
Exactly.
We often separate art and science, but this really highlights how deeply connected they are. It's like art becomes a language, a way to communicate complex scientific ideas in a way that just hits differently.
Exactly. And this connection between art and our understanding of the natural world, it goes way, way back, even further than Darwin. We can trace it back to ancient cave paintings.
Oh, you mean like those handprints and animal figures? I remember learning about those in school. Those were more than just early forms of art, weren't they?
Much more. Those cave paintings were created thousands of years ago, but they weren't just decoration. They were vital records of the natural world. They were conveying knowledge about the animals they lived with, the animals they depended on for survival. It's like their way of documenting and passing down ecological knowledge for generations to come.
Wow, it's like their version of National Geographic, but etched onto the walls of caves. So cool. But the article also mentions something called bestiaries from medieval times. What are those all about? Were those scientific documents?
Not in the way we think of them now. Case were these beautifully illustrated manuscripts really popular in medieval Europe. They were collections of descriptions and illustrations of animals. But, and here's where it gets interesting, they included both real and mythical creatures.
Wait, mythical creatures like unicorns and dragons and stuff. What were those doing mixed in with real animals?
It seems strange to us now, but bestiaries were less about scientific accuracy and more about reflecting how people viewed the world back then. They were trying to make sense of their surroundings. In a way, they were a stepping stone, paving the way for a more scientific approach to studying and illustrating the natural world.
So even with their fantastical elements, they were an important part of the journey. It's like they were setting the stage for the Renaissance, which the article points to as a real turning point. And speaking of the Renaissance, no one embodies that spirit of discovery better than Leonardo da Vinci.
Da Vinci, a true Renaissance fan. He was a scientist, an inventor, and an artist all rolled into one. His notebooks are full of sketches of plants, animals, anatomical studies, you name it. If it was part of the natural world, he was fascinated by it.
It's incredible, really.
His detailed studies of birds in flight, the way he captured the muscles of a horse in motion, those weren't just beautiful drawings. They were attempts to understand and depict the world with this incredible scientific eye.
So he wasn't just making pretty pictures. He was trying to unlock the secrets of nature through his art, which, by the way, makes him even more of a genius in my book.
Absolutely. And his work was hugely influential. It really helped pave the way for the emergence of scientific illustration as its own distinct field, one where accuracy and beauty weren't separate goals anymore.
And alongside Da Vinci, we have another artistic giant of the Renaissance, Albrecht Dürer. I actually studied his young hair in our history class. The detail in that piece is unbelievable.
Dewar's work is a perfect example of that meticulous detail and realism that defined this new era. His young hare and his woodcut the rhinoceros showcased his incredible ability to render animals with such precision. These weren't generic representations. They were based on careful observation. Each stroke was striving for scientific accuracy without sacrificing artistic beauty.
So we've got Da Vinci and Dürer pushing the boundaries of art and science. What else was happening during the Renaissance that impacted the development of wildlife illustration?
Well, we start to see the rise of botanical gardens and natural history collections. These weren't just pretty gardens or cabinets of curiosities. They were like living libraries of the natural world.
It's like someone opened up this treasure chest of inspiration and information for these artists and scientists. Imagine having access to all those exotic plants and animals, many of them completely new to European eyes. It must have really fueled their curiosity.
It did, and it further cemented that link between art and science. And this brings us to the Age of Exploration, a period just overflowing with excitement for uncharted territories and, of course, encountering these creatures never seen before by European eyes. So it makes sense that wildlife illustration flourished during this era.
Right. It's like those ships weren't just carrying explorers, they were carrying the seeds of all these groundbreaking scientific discoveries. And artists were there to document them all. But hold on. If you're a naturalist in the 17th century sailing to a new continent and you find an amazing new species, how do you record that information? You can't exactly just like pop it in an envelope and mail it back home.
That's where someone like Maria Sibylla Merian comes in. She was an amazing naturalist and artist who took this daring journey to Suriname in the late 1600s, specifically to study and document the insect life.
Suriname, wow. That's dedication. What was so special about the insects there?
Well, for one thing, they were completely new to European science. But her work went beyond just cataloging these creatures. It was about understanding their life cycles, their connection with the environment, the whole predator-prey dynamic.
She was like a scientific detective, piecing together this hidden world of insects and showing us what she found through her art.
Exactly. Her illustrations were incredibly detailed, bursting with color, but they were also meticulously accurate. They captured not just what these insects looked like, but how they behaved in their environment. Her work really revolutionized the field of entomology.
It's incredible how one person can have such a big impact. It's inspiring.
Absolutely. And she wasn't alone. The article also talks about artists like Sidney Parkinson and John Webber, who sailed with Captain Cook on his voyages to the Pacific.
Oh, wow, Captain Cook. Now we're talking about some serious exploration. What kind of amazing creatures were they seeing on those voyages?
Imagine being the first European to ever lay eyes on a kangaroo, or coming face to face with birds of paradise. These artists had to capture it all, create the first visual records of these species for a European audience that was just like desperate for this knowledge.
That's a lot of pressure. Can you imagine seeing a kangaroo for the first time and then having to figure out how to accurately draw it?
It's quite a challenge. And speaking of challenges, the article also mentions Elizabeth Gould. She was creating this incredible body of work during this time, but she was often overshadowed by her husband, John Gould, a renowned ornithologist.
It's unfortunate how often that happens. The contributions of women in science, especially in scientific illustration, don't always get the recognition they deserve.
You're right. Elizabeth Gould was incredibly talented, and she was instrumental to her husband's research. He was out there collecting specimens, and she was back in the studio, breathing life into those discoveries with her illustrations.
So she was giving those birds a voice, a presence that went way beyond a simple anatomical drawing.
Exactly. Her illustrations weren't just accurate, they captured the spirit of these birds, their personalities even. Especially her work from their travels to Australia, it really showcased this incredible diversity of bird life.
It really makes you wonder how many other talented women were out there making huge contributions to these scientific discoveries. But we don't know their names. It's important to remember to look for those hidden figures.
It is. It's about looking beyond the familiar stories.
So we've journeyed from those early cave paintings to the Renaissance, through the Age of Exploration, and we've seen how wildlife illustration has evolved right alongside our scientific understanding of the world. But this is more than just a history lesson, right? The story doesn't just end there. It feels like we're just getting started. This whole journey through the history of wildlife illustration has really opened my eyes to how important it still is today. Speaking of which, the article spends a lot of time on this concept of biodiversity. What role does wildlife illustration play in helping us understand that? It's more than just a buzzword, right?
It really is. Think of it this way.
Yeah.
You can give all the facts and fun about endangered species you want, but sometimes a single image can cut through all that and just grab you.
It's like that old saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words, but in this case, it's more like a picture is worth 1,000 data points.
Exactly. And remember, Maria Sibylla Marion, our insect enthusiast from earlier, her work wasn't just about, showing how beautiful insects are. She was documenting a whole ecosystem in a way that no one had ever done before. Her illustrations showed the interconnectedness of it all.
It's like she was one of the first to really show us what biodiversity looks like. And that actually takes me to another point the article makes. The role of wildlife art in conservation. It's not just about pretty pictures, is it? It's about inspiring action.
Exactly. Art has this power to make us feel things, to connect with something on a deeper level than words sometimes. Think about artists like Robert Bateman, who paints these amazing, realistic animals, but he often places them in these settings that subtly highlight the threats they face. And his work, and artists like David Shepard, they're not just painting animals, they're telling stories, raising
And
awareness.
it's not just individual artists either, right? The article talked about some pretty impactful campaigns.
Absolutely. The Save the Whales campaign from the 70s is a great example. Those images of whales, they were everywhere. And they really helped change public opinion, which is incredible.
It's like art became a universal language. And in this case, it was speaking about the need to protect our planet. Which makes me think about the part of the article about documentation, a little bit of a heavy topic, but an important one, especially when it comes to endangered or extinct species.
It definitely makes you think about what we stand to lose. The article mentioned the passenger pigeon, which used to be so numerous that they would like block out the sun, and now gone.
It's sad, but it's a good reminder that our actions matter and that we have to protect what we have. So, with all that in mind, how does wildlife illustration fit into modern ecology? Is it still relevant?
More than ever. We're facing some big environmental issues, things like climate change, habitat loss, and we need everyone to be on board to find solutions. And wildlife illustration can help bridge that gap between science and the public.
Yeah.
Well, artists can take these complex topics, like predator-prey relationships or the impact of pollution, and make them understandable for people who aren't scientists.
It's like making the invisible visible.
That's a great way to put it. And what's really exciting is that there's this whole new generation of wildlife artists coming up who are not only talented, but passionate about making a difference. The article even mentioned how art schools are including more scientific illustration in their programs.
That's really encouraging to hear.
It is, and it just goes to show how much potential there is for this unique blend of art and science to continue to inspire and educate us about the natural world.
Well, that is a fantastic point to wrap up on. This deep dive into the world of wildlife scientific illustration has been eye-opening, inspiring, and a great reminder of the power of art to make a difference. Until next time, keep exploring, and we'll see you on our next deep dive.